So I came to Slovenia 1 year ago because of my husband's work. And most of my friends had absolutely no idea where I was going. And some thought that maybe I was going to Bratislava or that I was going to a war zone. Really, and I'm explaining to say, well, actually, it's very, very different than what you think. But all that I really knew was that Bled was gorgeous and Ljubljana was beautiful, and that everybody said it was such a fantastic place to live. And so I agreed to move here, and then I started my own journey of discovery. And of course, discovering a new country is a little bit like having a new lover. So in the beginning, everything is new and amazing, of course. I wrote to all my friends, it's so clean and so safe and well organized. Everyone speaks English or German or both. And even if they don't, they really make an effort to communicate, which is totally different from Paris, where if you put one accent wrong, they pretend not to understand anything that you said at all. I told them that the food and the coffee and the wine was just excellent, and that everyone is sporty and attractive and relaxed, and that for some reason people manage to work hard and then go off to their cottage in the mountains or their summer house in Croatia on Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock. It's fantastic, fantastic lifestyle. But then, of course, you start getting to know your new lover a little bit better, and you start looking a little bit deeper. And it turns out that your new lover is broke, and borrowing much more money than he can ever pay back. And that he lends money that he doesn't have to his friends who gamble, and that he pays for all of his friends' dinners and lunches, even though he can't afford it. And that he suffers from a deep, deep past trauma, which is stopping him from being all that he can be. And so it was with my discovery of Slovenia. So underneath all this amazing exterior, there is of course some serious economic challenges, heavy political polarization, and a deep, deep distrust between various groups in the society. And to my amazement, I found that almost every single conversation that I start with anyone about Slovenia always ends up somewhere in World War II, which was something that I would never really have expected. And then when I talk to young people, I hear a mix of frustration with hope and resignation with good ideas, but mostly also a desire for the same old guys that are perpetuating the same old problems to make way for a new generation. So I want to tell something to the new generation. People in power don't leave. People in power are not going to give it away. If you want to change things, if you want to have political power, you're going to have to take it and not wait for someone to give it to you. I think the politicians will agree with me that that's the way it works. So my talk today has the title, How the Next Generation Can Transform Slovenia. And I know that sounds incredibly pretentious, but actually it is quite simple. The world is changing and we have to change with it, or we're going to be left behind. And no generation is better equipped or has more interest in trying to change this than the people who have to live here for the longest amount of time. Because it is their world, it is our world, it is the world of the young people. Now, if I were a young person in Slovenia today, of course I'm very old and wise as you can tell, I would be angry, I would say even furious, about quite a number of things. The first thing I would be furious about is the national debt. Now, the youth movement of my political party refers to this as intergenerational theft, just to make the point of what a debt really is. It is stealing from the future generation to subsidize the current generation. Now, secondly, the things that a lot of this money is being spent on, like propping up badly run banks or bailing out badly run public companies, is not the kind of stuff that you want the money which is being stolen from you to be going to. So that would make me very furious as well. When I tell my European friends who ask me how Slovenia is doing, that the state still owns, either directly or indirectly, supermarkets, breweries, hotels, banks, telephone companies, they can't really believe it. And then, of course, when you look at this, and that some of them have made profit for quite a while, and some of them are definitely not as profitable as their private sector counterparts are, you wonder how this can be perpetuated and how long this can still last. And if you look, of course, at all of the European reports about Slovenia, it makes it clear that the current pension system is completely unsustainable as well. So quite a lot of things to be angry about. What I also tell people when I try to explain what's happening in Slovenia, I tell them in Slovenia not only can you study for free, but you can also get subsidized meals. The studentski bom. And I always tell this story because it symbolizes everything that's wrong with the system. Because of course rich kids, they get this as well. So there's no money, the tax money is given for students to eat 3-course lunches in restaurants, and I know because I've had the same lunch for the real price in the same restaurant, they're very good lunches. And I think that's really hard for anybody who does basic maths. You don't have to be an economist to understand that that doesn't work. Now, my study time, and the studies of most Europeans, studying is not about having 3-course meals in restaurants. It's about getting together with your friends and cooking cheap pasta, and at the end of the week you have nothing left, just a little bit of cheese and maybe some oil to put on it, but that's the way it should work. And then I see these students in their restaurants and I think, wow, no wonder the country has no money. Now, when I started law school, the government, the Dutch government had a plan to introduce a study grant and free travel for every student, regardless of income. It was called study financing, studiefinanciering. I thought this was completely ridiculous. My parents could afford to finance my studies, and we had a very famous student among us, Prince Willem-Alexander, who's now the king, and everybody knew he could afford it because his mother is the second richest woman in the whole world. Both he and I were now going to get subsidized study. Anyways, we organized demonstrations, not the king, but me and my friends organized demonstrations against it. Nevertheless, it was introduced. Now, of course, the government can't afford it anymore. They have to get rid of it again, but that is extremely difficult because once you start handing out free things, people get very attached to it, and it is extremely difficult to undo it. Of course, people know that even though they're getting free education or free lunches or free books or whatever is free, you get the bill some other way, like higher taxes or lack of investment in other things, but it just feels so nice to have free things. So let's say that you are angry about any of these things or about other things. I was speaking to some students and they say that they're frustrated about the lack of good jobs. They think that the way to get jobs is through connections, not through qualifications, which is very frustrating because this shouldn't be that way. And I'm going off to Pristina. I've been in Albania. That's the way it works over there. This is Slovenia. It shouldn't work that way over here. So what are the kind of things you can do? I'll mention 5 things, and I'm going to start with the most obvious one, which is to vote. Now, if you look at the turnout in elections and the referenda, it is quite clear that, first of all, not all people vote, but it looks especially like not the young people are voting or the progressive people are voting. And I look, for example, at the outcome of the law on the family law. Now, I assume not many young people vote because it cannot be in the young people's interest to keep on subsidizing the current pension system. So what happens then is it's easy to see why the pensioners and the trade unionists are holding the country to ransom. Because they vote. Because if you vote, you get a voice and your voice is bigger. And if you don't go to vote, then you shouldn't complain that the vote is being hijacked by those people who do vote. Because that's simply the way it works in a democracy. And if you don't vote, you can't complain, and we all love to complain. So don't take away your right to complain, because that's, of course, the key thing to do in politics. My second piece of advice is to get involved in politics. Now, if you don't like any of the existing parties, start your own. If you do like them, then get involved, join them, become active, and make your voice heard. Run for office. Write to your MP, write to your MEP, write to the government ministers. Some of them are sitting right here. Go talk to them in the coffee break and say, this is what I would like to do, what have you done? And I think it's a wonderful initiative, which was organized today to say, look, you guys made some promises 2 years ago, let's see where you are now. And I really hope that the young managers will keep up the pressure and to keep on asking and to see what is being done with the promises, because that's the essence of how democracy works. Politicians, and I say this because I'm one of them, are only as good as we demand. If we let them get away with breaking their promises, that's our fault. It's not the fault of the politicians, it's our fault because we're letting them get away with it. Now, in my country, we have a very long tradition of independent youth movements. They challenge the mother party, they pressure the mother party. They're not just there, the young people, to fill the space, but they're actually a real force to be reckoned with. And I strongly encourage people, if the party doesn't already have a youth movement, then start your own, but make sure it's a real voice for change. And I actually think it's also a very great place to meet like-minded people, people who care about the country, people who share your values. I actually met my husband at our political party. My party is called Democrat 66. So we call it Dating 66 because it ended up very good for us personally. The third advice I would have is set up a pressure group. And in a way, I guess what you have here is a pressure group based on specific themes which are relevant for the economy. In the Netherlands, a group of young people set up a group called the Group of 500. And they had a very interesting plan, which they're implementing now, which is to take 500 young people and to join the 3 biggest political parties, to infiltrate them, to work from the inside with a 10-point plan, pension reform, reducing the debt, making real change to make sure education was more focused towards jobs, to stop subsidizing early retirement, all these kind of things that are working against young people to really change that. And they picked the 3 largest parties, which are also the most conservative parties, the Social Democrats, the Conservative Liberals, and the Christian Democrats, and they're joining them as members because the internal party democracy then allows you to have a voice and to change things. And it's become so successful that they now have more than 1,000 people who have joined, and they're trying to cooperate to try to change. And you see that it has changed the tone already of the debate about pension reform, and we were able to raise the pension age from 65 to 67, which is still, of course, not enough if you consider how long people live, but at least it is a first step, which means we stop subsidizing people to quit working early. Of course, if I were here in Slovenia, I would first start with the Studentski bond, but I think you understand that that is one of my pet peeves in the country. Number 4 is to speak out on these issues. And I really want to give my compliments to the university for hosting this, because I think it's really important to have these discussions accessible for all, because we politicians can become kind of like inward-looking, talking to each other, and it's important to make sure the dialogue remains extremely open. It's important to write angry letters to the newspapers, to write to the politicians, to engage with your friends. I'm following, I haven't been able to read it yet, but this story about this journalist who tried to join the Anti-Corruption Commission. I think it's a really interesting story, because not only did he try to change something by being the difference, but then when it didn't work out, he wrote about it. And I think that's really important, to write about these experiences and to share them. And I'd love to meet the guy and then to find out, what happened there. But it's an interesting example of how you can really engage as one individual, because as far as I know, everybody's talking about this story, and that can really make a difference in the way these things are perceived. Now, I don't know if any of you have read the book Complaint-Free World. It's of course by an American. American always have these great ideas, because one of the key things, of course, after we do all this complaining and arguing and everything, is to say, what is the solution? What can I do? What can you do? What can we do? And this American pastor who invented this concept of complaint-free world said that complaining in a way is a bad habit like smoking, and you need 21 days to break a bad habit. So he says, try to correct yourself and other people that when they complain about something, say, okay, that was very interesting analysis, now what are we going to do? What can I do? What can you do? What can we do to change it? And I think that's really important, to take all that anger and frustration and to turn it into action, because otherwise it's just going to hang there and make you feel terribly helpless, and that's no good for anyone. And my 5th and my final recommendation to the new generation is leave. Go abroad, get experiences, get all that nice international experience, then bring it back and invest it into Slovenia. Slovenia is a small country, like the Netherlands. We are 17 million, you are 2 million, and the only way small countries can succeed is by being open. To be open to investment, to be open to experiences, to be open to other people. Slovenia has a very homogeneous society, which is great, because it means it's safe and everybody knows each other, and it's a it makes for a very comfortable environment. But it also means that you're missing fresh new ideas, and this has to come from the new generation. So I say to the new generation, before you have kids and before you have a mortgage, go do your foreign ventures, and then come back here to raise your children, because it's a perfect place to raise children. And then the message to the government, and especially the government-run companies, is when people come with these foreign experiences, don't see it as a threat. See it as an opportunity, not something that will show that you're not doing things well, but as an opportunity to improve. That's really important. Now, this is a very tough period for the country, both economically and socially. And it must be interesting that so quickly after independence, which was the first priority, that you achieved the other ones, EU membership and NATO membership. And it's interesting that even the president is kind of looking for what is the 2020 vision of, what will be the future, what kind of country do you want to be? And I think what's really important is not to get stuck in jargon when you talk about a vision for a country, a competitive economy, lifelong learning, sustainable development. Those are words that don't really mean anything. I think if the government, the politicians, the president really want to bring the people along, it's important to paint a picture, a real picture of a vision where the country is going to be 20 years from now and how to get there. And I'm going to make an attempt to do that, which is always very dangerous for a foreigner to do, but I think, put your money where your mouth is, let's try to do it. But first I'm going to show you how we did it for Holland. How many of you have been to New York City or have seen movies about New York City or have an image of New York? I assume most people have some kind of feeling of New York. So my good friend Jozef van Aartsen, he's a former Dutch foreign minister, he's now the mayor of The Hague. He painted a vision, what I thought was a very compelling vision of the future of the Netherlands. And it's the only one that I found for my country, which I think, God, that is really how I would love it to be. He said, we will be the Manhattan of Europe. So we'll be hip and happening and progressive and tolerant and open, hardworking, colorful, artistic, very, very open to the outside. And I always thought that is really the kind of, sexy image I would like to have of my country as kind of the Manhattan of Europe, where kind of cutting-edge modern things are happening. And so I thought, well, if you take kind of a picture like that, but then you put it on Slovenia, I have a completely different vision for Slovenia. Because Slovenia I really see as everything that is fantastic about living in a village. It's safe, it's very personal, people can rely on each other, people still, when you see each other in the streets, you acknowledge, you say, "Dobar kako ste." You have that personal contact like you have in a village. It's clean, it's beautiful, the air is fresh, the water is blue, so it's got that healthy feeling about it. It's got a very balanced lifestyle. People take time for their family and for their friends. They work, but they also make sure that it doesn't become, this thing that completely dominates you and wears you down and burns you out. It's a very healthy village. It's natural, it's sporty. People are always out. You see old people on the pot. You see old people in Krvavec, skiing down the hill as if, 70 years old doesn't matter now, they're still going strong. Everybody grows their own vegetables and grows their own herbs. I'm constantly getting these wonderful herbal teas from people that they grow in their own gardens. So there's this very earthy environment, kind of natural feeling about it. So then I thought, okay, so what image is the most famous village that everybody would know? A mythical village, of course. And I hope that I don't know if you guys actually know, but have you ever read Asterix and Obelix? A small village that is fighting against the decadent Romans. And they are completely independent, they're extremely proud. They work hard, but they also have their banquets and they have their feasts. And of course, every now and then they argue, especially, the guy who sells the fish and the other guy who says the fish isn't fresh. Well, that's Jan Jankovic, you let them do it. But at the family feast, at the banquet, everybody comes together and they celebrate everything that they're proud of. So that is my vision of Slovenia that I want to leave with you. Of course, it's not my place to make the vision. It is your place to make the vision. It is up to the current generation, the young generation, to come up with where do we want to be and how do you want to get there. That is really totally your job. But I wanted to do something a little bit more provocative and a little bit more stimulating. And thank you very much for having me.